Welcome to Sakshi TV Special Immigration Talk Show with attorney Ms. Prashanthi Reddy. Please know that Sakshi TV now has 5 immigration shows every week. On Monday with Somi Reddy, on Tuesdays with Mr. Kaveti, on Wednesdays with Prashanthi Reddy, on Thursdays with Chand Parvatneni, and on Fridays with Banu Nindra. Please tune in to ask your question. If you are an immigration attorney and would like to join our special shows, please email us at usa@sakshi.com or call us at 866-725-7441. Before we begin the show, please note that the information provided by this show is not for legal advice and for general purposes only. If you need any legal advice, please contact the attorney directly. Ms. Prashanthi Reddy Garu needs no introduction, but if you need consultation, you can definitely log on to their form, which is readyesq.com. They have provided wealth of free information and online tools in the hands of immigration community. So without any further delay, let us welcome Prashanthi Reddy Garu onto our show. Welcome back, Ms. Reddy. I hope you're doing well.
I am. Thank you. So nice to be here again, Shivani.
Thank you so much, Reddy Garu, for tuning in. So, Reddy Garu, today we decided that we will be covering a little on the H1B cap filings 2024. So, before we get on to the topic, are there any latest immigration updates or any H1B cap filing updates that the viewers must know before we get into the topic?
I think let's go with the topic. And as the questions are being asked, I think we can definitely, within the questions, cover the updates as well.
Yeah, of course. Now let's compare the previous year's updates and this year's. Have you personally seen any major changes in the H1B cap filings?
So H1B registrations have just closed. The lottery has been done. So that's one update. And the lottery results have come out as of last weekend. The last result was out on Saturday. There was an additional group of cases that were picked on Saturday as well. So as of Monday, April 1st, we are now allowed to file our H1Bs for all those people who got picked. And we have, for 90 days to file. So based on the percentage or the pick rate that I'm seeing in my office, it's about 30%. Pick rate, but and I would say based on what other attorneys are telling me, it's about 20 to 30% pick rate. So I would say that the number of registrations are similar to previous years. Last year it was something different because of duplicate registrations. But if you look at the number of single registrations, I think it's in between 300 to 400,000, and it'll be the same this year as well. Between 300 and 400, so I would say just say 350. Just if I had to give a number and based on that 30% pick rate. So that's the update. It's unofficial, of course. There is no, USCIS has not yet announced how many registrations have been done this year. Let's wait and see. But my estimate is that, my guesstimate is that it's about 350 to 400 based on the pick rate. So I think that's similar to the previous years. And now there hasn't been much change with reference to regulation for filing the H1B. Of course, there's been a lot of change, and we discussed this previously also with reference to how registrations are being picked, how lottery numbers are being picked. We saw that in order to avoid the incentive for beneficiaries to file duplicate registrations, they have changed the registrations this time in the sense that they are picking based on passport number rather than on the registration filed. So if a beneficiary has the same passport number, is filing more than 2 registrations, they will not be put into the lottery twice. They'll be put only once because they will identify that beneficiary through their passport number. So that is a huge change. Of course, we've seen change also in the website, and they have new organizational accounts, and there is a change in those accounts as well, and the way the accounts are interacting with other accounts. So there's been some change. There have been some issues with the way the system worked. It didn't work that well. Especially the last day and the day before, we saw that there were issues with the website. So we're just, we had to go through all that. And we also know because of these issues and because the website was not working properly, they increased the date. The original date for filing registrations was supposed to be Friday, but they then made that into Monday because the registrations were not, we were not able to file them because the system was not working. So this is a recap of what happened with reference to the registration process. Some hitches, but on the whole, I think it was fine. With the extra time given, I think people were able to recover from those hitches if they had any. Yeah, so that's the update, I think, with reference to what happened with the registrations this year.
Of course. Now, Ms. Reddy, is premium processing still available? And if yes or no, can you explain in detail what exactly is this premium processing for the H1B cap 2024?
So yes, premium processing is available, and that's a valid question because they decide every cap season whether they're going to allow premium processing for H1 cap cases or not. But in the last few years, they have been allowing almost as a default premium processing for cap cases, which is a good thing. Then the advantage of premium processing is that you will get a response within 30 days, 30 calendar days. You will get a response from USCIS. So they're premium processing it. Otherwise, it takes, well, recently they said that they have decreased the processing time of regular cases to 2.7 months. I think previously it was 3 to 4 months. Now they're saying that they are processing them within 2.7 months. But for premium processing, they will process your case in 30 days. When we say process, that means they will either send an approval or they will send a request for further evidence within 30 days. So if there is a request for further evidence, that means they need more documents. So either one, they're only required to send one or the other, the approval or the request for further evidence. And that they will do within 30 days. The premium processing fee has increased. That's another update. It's increased to 2,805, I believe, from 2,500. So yeah, that's the update with reference to premium processing. And yes, it's definitely available, Shivani.
Yeah. And now let's talk about the pros and cons when somebody is applying for the premium processing. Is there any drawback that the people can experience, or is it just an advantageous situation for all the people with money?
Some people seem to think it is a disadvantage because they think that since we're paying the premium processing fee and they're forced to respond within a certain period of time. Rather than giving an approval, it's easy for them to send a request for further evidence because that will give them more time to process the case and they don't have to adhere to that 30 days and they don't have to really look at that case carefully if they just send out an RFE, a request for further evidence. So that buys them more time, and some people seem to think that premium processing means that there's more likelihood of getting an RFE. I haven't really seen that, that they send out more RFEs for premium processing cases. In fact, USCIS has said that, if it's a premium processing case, then that is looked at by a special unit, and that unit of USCIS, they usually have more experience. So they usually hire attorneys who have more experience to look at those premium processing cases. So that's what I've seen. And this is the feedback that we have from USCIS. So I don't think there is any disadvantage for using premium processing. I think it's basically an advantage because if you're in a rush to get a response back, there are many instances where you might want to get your approval faster because you might have some further deadlines. So in those instances, it's definitely an advantage to do premium processing. Of course, the disadvantage is that it's a huge amount of money, right? It's 2,800. So you're like doubling the processing fee almost because the processing fee is that much and then you're doubling it. So it's about $5,000 or more processing fee if you're doing premium processing. So something to keep in mind. There are advantages and disadvantages.
Of course. Now, Ms. Reddy, what actually happens is that what I've seen majorly is that anybody who gets an RFE is in a panic situation. They're like, oh my God, why did I get an RFE? Is there anything wrong with this, filing? So when people do get these RFEs, what are some major points that I have to understand, and why should they be coming to you, and what ways can you help them?
So yes, getting a request for further evidence, there's no need to panic. And I agree with you, Shivani. People often, they tend to panic as soon as they get an RFE, especially more than the companies, the beneficiaries panic as soon as they see an RFE. There is no need for panic. It's not that they're going to deny your case. It's just that USCIS has some additional questions that they want to ask, some additional clarifications that they need. Doesn't mean that they will deny the case. Most RFEs get approved if they're responded properly. We've seen very few denials in the recent past unless there's some substantive issue that we cannot address. And that's rarely the case because most of the time we are looking into the case before we file it, and we're making sure that there is they meet the criteria for the H1. There could be some things that come up that we're not aware of and become aware of later. That's a different story, but that happens rarely. So bottom line is no need to panic if there's an RFE. Most probably we will be able to, your attorney will be able to respond to it, and you should successfully get an approval.
Yes.
So it's important though, when you're reading the RFE, when you get an RFE, to read it carefully, because if there is someone who doesn't have experience in trying to understand what USCIS is asking, then they might respond to the wrong issue, and then the case might get denied. Unfortunately, USCIS is sometimes not clear with the RFE language. They ask for information, but they're asking indirectly, or they're not being clear as to what they need. You need to have some background understanding of what USCIS is looking for and read between the lines sometimes to see how best to respond to that request for further evidence. And the other issue is USCIS will put in a whole lot of language that they're required to put in. So there'll be 3 pages of just case law that they're supposed to state, and within there, hidden somewhere, will be the question. So sometimes it's difficult to see where the question is and what they're asking. So I would suggest reading every line of that RFE response before you respond. I mean, if it's someone like me who's experienced, or another experienced attorney, they'll be immediately able to tell. They don't have to read the entire RFE. Even then I do, because you never know. But it's easy enough for us to spot the issues. But with someone who's not experienced, it might take more concentration or more reading to spot what the actual issue is. So it's important to read the entire RFE, every word from cover to cover. It's also important to make sure that you respond to the correct address, and you respond within the time given to you. There are deadlines. Every RFE has a deadline. They usually do not extend the deadline, and the deadline is a hard stop. So I wouldn't, take it lightly and say, okay, doesn't matter if I respond a day later. No, you can't respond a day later. They will deny the case. So that's the dates are important to keep in mind. The address that you send the response to is sometimes not the address that it comes from. So please read the entire RFE, especially the last page, to see where they're asking you to send the RFE. So these are a few of the points that I can think of that you should keep in mind when responding to H1 RFEs.
Yes. And also, Ms. Reddy, last year, like you told in the beginning, that there were a lot of duplicate cases and, a lot of double filings, and which led to a lot of H1Bs getting rejected or not even properly getting filed. Now, during that time, there were a lot of site visits, which also kind of created a panic situation for a lot of employees and the employers who applied for H1Bs. So can you in detail give us an update about what are these site visits, and do you see them happening again this year?
Yes. So yes, duplicate filings might not happen as much as they happened earlier, simply because, as I said, they remove the incentive to file duplicate cases. So beneficiaries may not feel the need to file duplicate cases anymore, though some might. if they're unsure of whether the first employer will file or not for their H1, or maybe they just want a safety net and they want to go with, file with one or two employers and go with the employer that provides them, the best incentives or best salary, or, the best job possible. So that's always possible, and that fosters competition. So that's good in a way. But otherwise, I think registrations will be reduced to a great extent, the duplicate registrations. So, and, employers filing duplicate registrations through, conspiring with other companies, that scenario also might be reduced this year, because the companies now are aware that they will get into trouble if they do it. So they are, to the extent that I know, they are not doing it. So the fraud with reference to duplicate registrations will be reduced, and therefore there will not be any need for site visits or further investigation on that basis. But site visits can always happen. They have always happened. We're paying that extra 1,500 and 750 for that reason, so that USCIS can randomly check for fraud and send their FTNS officers for site visits. So that will always happen. There's no way to prevent or avoid that, because it's random. And the only way to be ready for those site visits is to make sure that your documents are in proper order, make sure you have your public access files in proper order, make sure that you are following the requirements of the H1B with reference to salary, work site, number of hours, with reference to when amendments need to be filed. So as long as you're doing all those things and you're maintaining your documents and you're following the law, I don't think there's any reason to be afraid of a site visit, even if it happens. So it will happen in normal course of events. But I think, Shivani, not for the duplicate registrations anymore.
Yes. Now let's talk about the post-approval process, Ms. Reddy. What are some things that the employee must know? What an employer must do after the the H1B is approved? What are some rules, regulations, and some responsibilities that this employer must follow post-approval?
So with the approval comes responsibility. So once the H1B gets approved, you have to then, depending especially if they're in the country and you filed a change of status, then you have to ensure that you put them on the payroll as per that prevailing wage that you filed in the LCA, and offer them the terms and conditions that you have mentioned in the LCA. So you have to offer them the salary that you mentioned. You have to make sure that they're working out of that work location that is mentioned in the LCA, and provide them with all the other benefits that you're providing your other employers. So you cannot discriminate between your H1B employees and your US citizen employees, for example. You have to provide them with the same benefits. If you're providing 401 health insurance for everyone, then you have to provide it for them as well. So that's one thing. The other thing is you have to make sure that you are maintaining your documents. Like I said, with the FTNS visits, they often, or the DOL audits, they're looking, or USCIS audits, they're looking to make sure that you're maintaining documents. So you have to maintain your timesheets. If they are working as contractors at other client sites, you have to make sure you maintain your public access files. So public access file is a file that you have for every employee to ensure, and in that file, basically you have the LCA, you have the posting, you have your H1B approval and the petition copy, and you have the document which shows, which gives you an idea as to how they came up with the salary, how a company calculates the salary. So you have all those documents are required, and then you have the prevailing wage approval to show that you're paying the prevailing wage. So these are the documents that are required generally in a public access file. In addition to that, you also have to ensure that you're posting your LCA and for all your employees moving forward. You also have to make sure that your employee, at the day he starts or before, fills out the I-9 form. That's very important. You have to fill out the I-9 form and maintain that as part of your record. And that's an I-9 file that you have. In addition to the I-9, you also have to ensure that you check documents. So you have to check the H1B approval. You have to get ID documents, identification documents to ensure that it's the same person who's reporting for the job that filed the H1 who got the approval for the H1. So these are the I-9 requirements. So those have to be also taken care of. In addition to that, if that person is not going to be working for you, say you get a H1B approval and the person doesn't join you, then you have to make sure that you withdraw that petition with H1B, with USCIS. You inform USCIS that the person is no longer working for you and you withdraw that H1B petition. And if required, if they're here in the US, then you provide them with the transportation to go back to India or wherever they're from. So these are, I think, some of the requirements that I can think of that are obligations, that the employer is obligated to do.
Yeah. Now, let's say that the H1B petition has been approved, Ms. Reddy. From when can one start working in the United States?
So once the H1B is approved, if you are in the US, you can start working as soon as it gets approved, as soon as you get the approval notice in hand, because they need that for the I-9 verification. Of course, you might not have a social security number, so you can report to work. And then, once you get the social security number, you can be put on the payroll. So USCIS allows 30 days to 60 days for a person to get on the payroll. So they report to work and then the payroll can be delayed for 30 to 60 days in order to apply for social security and, take care of the I-9 and all the other requirements. So if you're outside the country, then it really depends on when you come into the country. So the date that you arrive into the country on a H1B is the date that you can start working.
Yes. And also, Ms. Reddy, let's talk about some alternative options if somebody wants to still work in the USA. And are there any other options that people can explore, especially in the employment basis in the United States?
So if they don't get picked in the cab, the work visa, H1B visa is still the best visa. But sometimes it might not be, especially if your occupation doesn't qualify as a specialty occupation, doesn't require a bachelor's degree in a specific field, then maybe you want to look at some other work visa options, which are limited, but they are there. One option is to, of course, file a green card directly if you qualify for EB1, or if you are not from India and you qualify for EB2, then it's possible that there's not a long wait and you will be able to come into the country within a year or two. So you can definitely apply for a green card directly. The other option is if you are from Canada, then you can apply for a work visa called the TN visa. You can also apply for an L1. Any country is eligible. Any nationality of any country is eligible to apply for an L1, and there is no cap. There are no numbers for an L1. They are unlimited numbers. You can apply at any time. L1 is a multinational executive, so you have to be working as an executive or a manager level position, and your company should have at least 2 offices, and there should be a qualifying relationship. So one office has to be in the US, and the other can be a foreign entity. But there has to be a qualifying relationship of a parent, a subsidiary, or an associate between the 2 companies. So L1 is one option. TN is an option if you're from Canada. You can definitely work on OPT if you're a student, or a CPT, curricular practical training or optional practical training if you're a student. You can work that way. If you're on a H4, you can apply for a H4 EAD if your spouse is on a H1. So that's another option. If your spouse is on a H1 and has an I-140 approved, then you qualify for this. If your spouse is on an L1, then if you are on an L2, dependent of an L1, also you get an EAD, and then you can qualify, you can work for any employer as well. Then you also have the E3 visa, which is for Australian nationals, which is pretty similar to H1. You have to prove that the job is a specialty occupation and there is no cap for E3s. So you can easily come in on an E3 as well. So these are some of the alternative work visas that are available in lieu of a H1.
Yes. And finally, Ms. Reddy, what are some expected expenses that people must be prepared if they want to file for an H1B cap petition next year at least?
So a H1B petition is usually filed by an employer. So whatever expenses have to be borne are borne by the employer. The beneficiary is not supposed to pay for any of the H1B expenses, just putting it out there so that you know. Expenses wise, the USCIS fee ranges depending on the number of employees that you have. If you have over 25, it's a different fee. If you have under 25, it's a different fee. So it ranges from about $2,000 to $3,000, $3,000+, because from April 1st, they actually increased the fee. So 2,000 to 3,000 is the range of fee that you're looking at. And if you're looking at premium processing, then that's an additional $2,800. So that's about what, $5,000-6,000 then. And then don't forget there's also an attorney fee. If you're using an attorney, then they will charge a certain amount of money, and every attorney is different. So that's, I think, the expense. There might be an educational evaluation that you need to do to evaluate your employees' credentials. That doesn't cost much. That should be under, $100, $150 or less. So the main expense, I think, is the USCIS fee in this situation.
Yes. And I think with that, Ms. Reddy, we can end today's session. We'll definitely continue again next week. Thank you so much, Andy, for tuning in. Thank you so much for the viewers for tuning in. You're watching Sakshi TV with me, Shivani Raj.
Thanks, Shivani.